What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Creative Rise Podcast. Today is a special episode for many, many reasons. First of all, it's just me on today's episode because I'm talking about my personal journey with ADHD. If you want to hear all about my personal journey with ADHD, how it affects my work, how it affected my childhood, this is the episode for you. Now, I also brought on my mom onto this episode. So later on in this podcast, you were going to hear a 10 to 15 minute snip from my mom on what it's like raising a Joey, a child with ADHD, some of the complications of what led them to diagnose me with it, get me tested, some of that process, and just all the ways that I grew up with ADHD, some of the ways that it affected my school, some of the ways that affected my work, both negative and positive. She kind of shined a little bit of light on all of that. So I really want to make sure you listen through the episode. If you have ADHD yourself, or you think you do, listen to this episode entirely. I really hope it's an encouragement to you. At the end of the episode, I'm going to give you some tactics and some tips for you to live and work and run a business with ADHD, because it's possible. Spoiler alert, it's possible. It's not only possible, I think you are at an advantage if you have ADHD, despite it looking like a disadvantage. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in the episode, but you're going to love this. If you are a parent and you've got a child with ADHD, listen to this episode. I hope it is going to help you. Now, just quick disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a guy with ADHD. I know a little bit about it. I've lived my whole life with it. How people are like, how long have you had ADHD for? I'm like, 24 years. They're like, what? Like, that's crazy. I'm like, well, that's how long I've had it. They're, when did you get diagnosed with that? I'm like, like 6th grade. Anyways, so point is, I'm going to talk about that, but I want to get right on into what is ADHD. Just a quick, let's cover the whole thing. ADHD is attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and it means a lot of different things. But the main thing it means is that my brain processes stuff in a different way. I am neurodivergent, which means that my brain does not always exercise the same way a lot of people's brains exercises. And what happens is there's a lot of different symptoms that can come out of ADHD, but the main one to me in my life, I'm going to read 9 of them in a second, but the main one to me is that I'm so great at focusing on what I want to focus on, but I suck at putting my focus and attention on something that I just don't feel is worth my time or is valuable in that moment. Doesn't mean it's not actually valuable, just in that moment, if I don't see it as valuable or I don't want to do it, my body, my brain actually has a disorder that makes me not want to do it. That sounds crazy, but that's actually what it is. So attention deficit, meaning I have a deficit when it comes to putting my attention on things that I need to put my attention on. And then I also have hyperactive disorder. So when you mix being hyper and being kind of like, whoa, like seeing things all over the place, your brain's always buzzing, hearing things. I'm the type of guy that if you're sitting with me, like at a restaurant, I'm listening to everything. I'm like, someone just dropped a plate on the other side of the restaurant, and then a woman laughed for like 20 seconds about it while I'm still listening to a conversation with you. Like, that's ADHD. You're aware of everything all at once. You're actually, like, people say, you can't focus on anything if you have ADHD. If you have ADHD, you actually focus on everything. We're like amazing focusers. We just can't focus in super well on one thing if we do not love it and if we don't want to give our attention to it. So here are the 9 most common symptoms of ADHD. If you experience any of these, it does not mean that you have ADHD. You might just be lazy or something like that. But if you do experience quite a bit of them, there could be a chance that you do have ADHD. I think the stats like 1 in 5 people on planet Earth have ADHD, have it to some extent. So ADHD, you have a shortened attention span. You're distracted easily. You make unnecessary mistakes. You lose items or you are forgetful about things. Christy finds so much stuff all the time for me. I'm like, Christy, I lost this. Where is this? I've been looking for 2 hours. She's like, you've been looking for 10 minutes, and here it is right there. Like, that's classic. Always changing from one task to another. That's so me. I'm not phenomenal at starting a task and finishing a task. We're going to talk about that later in the episode. My mom talks about that. Having difficulty with organization, okay? Hyperactivity, difficulty sitting still. If you're watching this podcast, I think you've probably seen me moving around. Like, people are like, dude, you're so charismatic. I'm like, kind of. I just also have a lot of ADHD. I'm always moving around, but I figured out how to use my like constant need for movement to make it feel engaging. Hopefully that's the idea. And this is funny, less risk avoidant and a decreased sense of danger. So I'm really into extreme sports, always have. That's where I feel the most alive, is like doing something crazy. It's saying that if you have ADHD, you are less risk avoidant and you have a decreased sense of danger, meaning you do more dangerous things. And last but not least, fidgeting. Now, here's the funniest part about ADHD. Ready? ADHD is ADHD considered a disability? That's the big question, right? I have ADHD. Am I a disabled person? Well, the answer is yes. ADHD is considered a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So there's several different types of disabilities, but this is one of them. I'm a disabled person, which is hilarious to hear for someone to tell me that. And we're going to talk a ton about that in this episode. But like, give me a parking pass or something. I wish I could get something for it. I actually could have used one this morning. We pulled into a place that was really busy, and I was like, we should park in a wheelchair. And Christy was like, no, you can't park in the disabled parking. I was like, well, I kind of have ADHD. Anyways, that's totally a joke, but that would be cool if there was like ADHD parking. You get too distracted walking into the parking lot, so they let you park up front of Nordstrom or something. Anyways, guys, let's talk about ADHD. So, yes, I have it. I've had it my whole life. I got diagnosed when I was in grade 6. I actually thought I got diagnosed way earlier than that. My mom quickly brought me back to, nope, you were in grade 6. My journey of having ADHD was really interesting. Like, I would say if I had to summarize my journey having ADHD when I was younger, I was so passionate about things, and the passion was misguided. I did not know how to focus my attention and really have like a strong backbone in terms of, okay, Joe, you need to focus on this now. We need you to focus on this. I would be like, no, I want to focus on this. So I had a ton of energy and a ton of passion, and I would use it in the wrong way. I would act out in school. I would do all these different things. I was a terrible kid growing up in terms of school. My track record at school was atrocious. I've had principals tell me I was going to end up in jail. There's a lot to my story behind all of that. So flash forward to where I am now. It's kind of ironic that I am sitting here on this podcast educating you. I'm teaching you. I'm a teacher in some ways, right? I own a couple different creative businesses, and one of them is Creative Rise, where we teach people for a living how to build businesses. It's kind of ironic that the kid who was so bad in school is now teaching. But ADHD has been a massive part of all that. And I think ADHD is a reason actually why I love to teach creatives business, because learning how to build a creative business was my ticket out of what a lot of people told me I was going to be going. Like, learning how to build a creative business was such a laneway, such a roadmap to getting me out of a potential discouraging future. Like I said, I was a terrible kid in school, terrible track record. Teachers, principals were like, dude, you're going to end up in jail by the time you're like 17, 18. And so me learning how to build a creative business when I was 14 really, really pulled me out of a lot of that. And I don't want to say save my life, but it was an incredibly encouraging thing that I needed, as I was on my way to a pretty discouraging future. So we're going to talk all about ADHD on this episode. But first, here is my mom talking about my ADHD journey, and she was so kind enough to do this. We talked earlier, and I was like, Mom, I got to get you on the podcast. So we got her on the podcast. Tune on in, listen to the entire thing. I ask hopefully some pretty good questions, and hopefully you get some value out of it. And then I'll meet you on the other side of asking her some questions. We're going to talk about what ADHD looks like for me as I work day in and day out, and some tips and strategies I have for anybody out there who's got ADHD, who needs to actually be a functioning human to build a business, because that's what we all need. And that's why you guys are all here. So we'll see you on the other side. Okay, Mom, welcome to the podcast. Brought my mom on. Everybody, this is Debbie. Debbie, Mom, so good to have you on the podcast. You are on here to talk to everybody about ADHD, your journey of not killing me as a crazy child, and how it all happened. So break down, if you had to explain your son's ADHD to somebody, what would you say? Broad question, but start there.
I would say that we arrived at trying to figure out if you had ADHD due to your absolute inability to focus on anything that you didn't like at all. If it was hockey, if it was mini sticks, you were zoned in. But anything
Mini sticks for all the Canadians.
Okay, yeah. Anything you didn't like, you really struggled in school. You had really bad behavioral issues, and we just didn't know what to do. So we went and spent the big $3,000 and got you tested.
Which is crazy, because I didn't even know that it cost anything to test until we were talking earlier today, and you told me it cost $3,000, which is nuts, because the school didn't pay for it.
No, you were at a private school, and that school did not pay for it. No.
Yeah, and a pretty crummy private school, to put that on the record too. This was not when you say private school, I feel like a lot of people listening are like, oh, this is like a private school with a polo team or something.
No. It was a small private.
Sure.
Kids that towed the line academically in that school did really, really well. Kids that did not were just considered really bad. And so you were considered bad. And so we didn't really know what to do.
Bad. Okay, so talk to me about actually getting like diagnosed. So you took me to get diagnosed. I remember it. I can remember sitting in the chair of that little office, and that guy or girl, I can't remember who it was, I think it was a guy, kept coming in and out. Was
Mhm.
it a girl? Okay, she kept coming in and out of the room. She would give me something to work on, and she'd come past it back, and she would like get the results on whatever it was. It'd be math, or it'd be write down this,
Yeah.
whatever it was. I would get tested on all this stuff. Talk to me about what those tests kind of came back as, because I think this is super fascinating. Now, we don't have my actual like IEP in front of me, but you have some of the diagnosis stuff on there. And we were talking about this earlier, and some of the stuff shocks me. It's hilarious. It's hilarious to hear now when I think
Yeah.
about it. Like, break some of that
Okay,
stuff down.
so the person that actually did the testing with you was over 2 days, like good chunks of time, and then they actually came and
Yeah.
visited you at school and sat in the back of your classroom.
I remember that. I
You were
remember.
like, get her out of here. Like you were pretty obstinate that she was there because kids were like, why is she here? And you're like, anyways, you had a good reason for everything that didn't go your way. So you gave them some sob story. But anyways, they came back and just really gave us a good picture of how frustrated you actually must be in your current situation. So a couple of things. You were diagnosed right off the bat with ADHD, so attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. And that was shown in your non-ability to sit still. You bounced, you ticked things, you just could not sit still, you could not focus. You were diagnosed with really slow processing speed. So anything that was sort of if you had to read something and then say back what you thought happened, you would have no clue because you were just focused on trying to
Yeah.
like get it into your head. And then you had 8% executive functioning, which I, as a mama, I was like, what does that mean? 8%
Eight. No, no. Just to clarify that, this is I have 8% out of 100 executive functioning, is what that is,
out of
right?
100 executive functioning. And executive functioning is your ability, as I understand it, and I'd have to go back to really read it, but your ability to manage your emotions, your ability to chunk things out, your ability to process things in order. And this came through in Joey, go clean your room. And like it would take you 5 hours, you'd get nothing done. And they
Couldn't
were
do it.
like,
Yeah.
I'm actually sitting in your room now, which is quite funny that we're having this discussion. They were like, you got to tell him to just only go pick up his socks. And so then
Yeah.
we learned to
Yeah.
chunk
Yeah.
things out in class. One time I got a call from the teacher. She was so frustrated with you. You were doing a test. This is grade 6. As we were getting you tested, we got you tested in grade 6. And she said, I've given him this test. And first of all, he went and turned on the class fan. And it's the middle of winter. So you turn on this fan that's like, brrr, and she would unplug it. And then you would go back and plug it back in. She had no idea why. I'll tell you why in a minute. And then secondly, it was like a 4-page test. And you got the first 2 questions, you answered those, and then you couldn't answer the third. And so you stopped because your ability to
Mm.
actually think, you know what, move on. And I got to manage my time, like maybe 10 minutes per page, and then I can come back. You had no ability to do that. So you just stopped. And she would come and turn your page, and you would just look at her with a stink eye and turn it back. Like, I can't, I can't move on.
Couldn't move
No,
on. Yeah.
if you
Couldn't
got
move
a
on.
big project, they would say, Joey, you've got 6 weeks to work on this project and it's got all these different things on it. First of all, I wouldn't know for the first 5 weeks because you would just not bring it home or you would hide it. And then I would say, okay, we've got a week to finish this. I'd drag you off the ski hill and I'd be like, we have a week to finish this. But you would have no ability in understanding when looking at it what should take you 5 minutes versus what should take you an hour, where you should put your time, where you should put your effort. Like I remember you doing a title page and you're just coloring and coloring and coloring. And I'm like, Joe, that's not the point. The point is get to the content, but you're like, I can't, I have to finish this. And really, Ma, this is all I know how to do.
Yeah. Okay. So I couldn't start
No.
things. I had terrible executive functioning, which is a funny thing to wrap your head around because I think a lot of people would consider me to be quite executive in terms of my
Yeah.
functioning now. But it's interesting to think about what maybe has changed. I don't know. Um, I would act out all the time because I was bored and I don't want to have fun. Uh, I I would get mad at teachers, like all these things. What what are some of the benefits of what you saw in me having ADHD? Because I think that's where this conversation is so interesting. Is I'm a fan of ADHD as a tool. Like I see it as a
Yeah.
tool now. I think you and Dad see that as a tool in me. I've learned how to get excited about what I'm excited about. As you said at the beginning of you talking, I would not do things I didn't want to do. That's still true today. I suck at doing anything that I don't want to do. I just suck at it. But I'm really good at doing things I really want to do. So I see that as a tool. It can be a challenge at the same time. But where did you start to see the change in me where I went from terrible student, terrible kid, drove people crazy to, oh, he's actually looks like he might have a life and not end up in jail? Like, what was the
Yeah.
change?
The good news is all the way through, we saw such glimmers of where you would dig deep. Like you would fight for the underdog like nobody else. Like you looked at justice really strongly. If something was unjust, then you could get spit out a 500-word essay on why that was unjust. Now you wouldn't be able to write it down. It just came out of your mouth, sort of like,
I'd have to have a
yeah,
scribe, which I actually did in high school. I had
yeah.
scribes for my test. I would just get to talk, and they would get to write
Where
everything.
you started to realize that you had to actually get through school in order to get where you wanted. So it wasn't an option. But where you started to get teachers that actually started teaching you the way that your brain could take it. They weren't forcing you to write everything down. Sometimes they did your tests audibly. You had a math teacher that made everything very visual for you. And so you stopped fighting the system when people started working with you. The school that we first brought your actual IEP to in Barrie, when we moved to Barrie, they 3 times just said, "Oh, we've lost his IEP." And they would call me every day and tell me everything you were doing wrong. And I screamed into the phone one day and said, "Don't you ever phone me again until his IEP is fully instituted and you have a plan." And it was then, and then you got a great teacher and you got a great CERT, like a special education resource teacher, Mrs. that just dove in with you. And as soon as you started to feel like people were on your side, that made a huge difference. Because if you didn't feel people were on your side, then you wanted to show them how awful you could be. It was like Olympic sport to you to take
Oh
it to
yeah.
take it to the bottom. And once people realize that if they could allow you to be a leader and if they could allow you to have some freedom, then you started to shine. But in high school, you more got into a few things that you really enjoyed in academics, things that you actually were a bit more interested in. And then on the side of school, Dad and I just started saying, you got to do your work, but we care more in your videography. We care more in your skateboarding. We care more in building a ramp out in the backyard for you to have your buddies over. Like the stuff that you are passionate about and photography, we just threw everything in behind that and skiing because those were the things that then you started to actually start building a business with. And we were like, we don't
Mhm.
really care about the schooling part. Yes, he has to do it, but it wasn't going to be where you were going to thrive. It was definitely not set up for success for you.
Well, okay, and then for all the parents listening, because we do have quite a few people who have young kids with ADHD, I would think that when you guys allowed me to pursue the things that I really, really wanted to do. I only wanted to put my focus on things I wanted to do. I did not want to put any focus. And actually my body like repels, my
Yeah,
brain repels things I don't like. Like it's not for everyone listening. It's not like, oh, Joey just is lazy and he doesn't like doing things he doesn't like. It's like my brain sometimes cannot figure out how to actually
it
get me
was
to do it. It's like life just goes, don't do it. You don't like to do that, don't do it. And your body just doesn't want to do it. Anyways, as I started to
it's not just
focus.
that. It's not that you just didn't want to do it. Your brain didn't know how to do it. So it shut it off.
Yeah,
Not
exactly. It's like my brain didn't know
okay.
how to do it. But the other part of that is when I was getting in, when I was encouraged into the things I loved, I think it actually
Oh,
gave me a capacity for things that I didn't love. Would
yeah,
you
you
agree
were
with that?
tenacious. Like where most kids would quit if they were trying something, you were tenacious. Where you didn't have the money to get something that you needed for the next level up, you made it. I mean, you made skateboarding gloves out of gardening gloves and
Yeah, the longboarding.
plastic
Yeah.
cutting boards and glued them on and it worked. And then you started a business of selling them to other kids where most kids would say, your parents would say, you can't go skateboarding because you don't have the right gloves. And they go, oh, okay. You were like, I'll figure out a way. So your ability to laser focus on something was
Problem solve.
your ability
Yeah.
to problem solve on things that you chose to was astronomical.
Yeah, and the more I was allowed to problem solve on things that I was excited about, the more capacity I had to get the stuff done that I wasn't excited about, right? But school often was like, you can't focus on the things you love. You have to focus on the things you don't love. And I would just fight against that, and I would
Well,
bury everything, and I wouldn't do it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So okay, so just for the sake of time, so you put me on meds when I first got diagnosed, which I thought was way earlier than
No,
grade six. I'm just finding
actually,
that out now. I thought I was like 7 or 8 years old, 6 or 7 or 8 years old. It was grade six. I got on meds. I stopped taking meds way before you knew I stopped taking my meds. You came down to my bathroom one day and you said, "Hey, like, why am I finding all these Adderall bottles that are full?" And I was like, "I haven't taken those for like a year." Um,
your
so
mind plays a few tricks on you, Joe. It's not actually like that, but you did start taking them. You did stop probably like a month or so before because then we really realized that you were going off a little bit. But
Oh, I think I stopped before
Joe,
you
you
knew I
also thought you were
stopped.
diagnosed at the age of 4. So keep going.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so when I did you notice a difference after I got off medication? Because a lot of people say they're like, I'm scared to get off medication because I don't know what I
Mhm.
would be like. And they ask me my opinion on it. And I always say, well, I don't feel like medication ever did much for me. You might have a different response to that, but
Okay.
I think that the ADHD medication didn't do that much for me. And so when I got off of it, like people say, oh, if you get off of the medication, it's like a tough first month because your body's literally addicted to what's in the Adderall, which is like basically medical cocaine, practically. Like that's how my doctor described it to me one day. And are you
No,
shaking your head
no,
saying
I
that's not
just
true?
don't know the answer. So
Oh, oh yeah, it is. They were like, she was basically like, she said, "Oh, Joey, cool party trick. Not that you should ever do this, but if you ever went and did like 3 lines of cocaine, nothing would
oh,
ever happen to you
jeez.
because basically your literally my doctor told me that. She said your body is so used to the base of cocaine being in your bloodstream because it's the same
Yeah.
thing
Okay.
as Adderall. So,
Okay.
anyways, I didn't notice any difference when I
Well,
jumped off of Adderall and stopped taking meds. But what
okay.
do you think about that?
So when you were young, early on in the process, when you would not take it for a couple of days, we could tell. You were unfocused, you were angry, like really. But when you got a little bit older and got more into like the grade 9 and 10, we allowed you to stop for the whole summer because you didn't really need to focus the same that you did in the school year, but you stayed on it in the
Yeah.
school year. Absolutely, we would notice a difference until you got old enough that you started getting some skills and some strategies on how to actually function. Keep in mind, in grade 6, your brain is not developed. In grade 10, your brain is not developed, but it was developing. So you were able to come off of Adderall altogether, and then you would go back on it for exams. You'd go on about 2 weeks before exams to help you start to really focus in again, because you'd be like, "This is you. I don't know. I think I've got something in this paper," and I'm like, "Okay, it's." You'd go
See,
back.
I don't think it made a difference for any of that time when I would go back on for
Okay,
exams. But
folks, believe.
you're my mom, you might have done
Mhm,
differently.
mhm.
So, anyways, okay, let's. What advice do you have for people that are parenting children, or for people that feel like they're parenting
Yeah, yeah,
themselves through ADHD? I know so many people that have messaged me saying, "Hey, I was diagnosed later in life. Like I got diagnosed when I was 21 or when I was
yeah,
35, and it's been devastating or it's been really
yeah.
challenging." When people ask me about getting diagnosed, I'm like, "Oh, it was chill. Like I didn't think anything of it really because I was younger and I was just a troublemaker in school and I was having fun and I did
You
not
didn't care.
care about school. So getting something to help me focus, I just didn't care about it, right? Or even the problems. I even remember back now, like I don't remember ever in my I do not have a moment in my life where I remember being told by a doctor or by a teacher that I have ADHD and feeling shameful about it. I don't. Like I always was kind of like, oh,
You
it's
would
ADHD,
allow
like
anybody to
whatever.
give you shame, Joe. There's not a chance.
That's what I mean. Like, I don't remember anyone ever saying that and me feeling shame about it. Like, I always saw it as like, oh, it's just what I am, who I am, and I'm not going to let the label dictate
Okay.
my future. But for people that are struggling with, oh, I feel like the label's dictating my future a little bit, or for a parent who's like, I got a kid who's got it, and I feel like the label's going to dictate their future, what would you
Okay.
say to them?
I would say that we allowed society to tell us for way too long that you were just a bad behavior kid. And I would now start to
Mm,
really dig in. If I could go back, I would, first of all, I would have pulled you from that school because it was not
amen.
set up for you to succeed. I apologize right now. Okay, I apologize, Joe. I should have done that, but I didn't know because you were just being naughty. Like it,
No, but that's okay. I don't look back on that and go, I don't have any regret because I'm like, that taught me so much about
I know.
confrontation And those years shaped me. So yeah, keep
Too,
going.
I would just be my kid's advocate way differently. I would learn to look at the way the neurodiversity is just you think differently. Your brain just works differently than the other kids. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but
Yeah, it shouldn't be called a
right.
disorder. It
It
really shouldn't be
it
called a
should
disorder.
not, but it's just different. But back then it's a disorder and you're one of those kids and you're labeled. Now I would just search and find ways to just allow you to function in the way that you needed to do best. I would say get rid of the stigma, find a way to have advocates for your kid or for you to figure out what you love and what you're really good at and pour your heart into that and the other stuff will come. Your self-esteem, Joe, whether you'd like to know it or not, your self-esteem in so many ways was so low because everybody just everywhere you went just said that you were a bad kid. And so once we started
Mm,
pumping into you all the other stuff that built you up, then the other stuff started to change. I would just
yeah.
say look at it as a difference. Don't look at it as a disorder. Look at it as you're
Yeah.
I remember one doctor once said, if you can parent him through this, because you also were oppositional. So you also had oppositional issues. If you can parent him through this without breaking his spirit, he's going to be a phenomenal high school student. He is not going to let anybody sway him. He's not going to get into drugs. He's not going to get into alcohol. He's not going to care about all these things because he's going to be so focused on what he likes. And it was 100% true. The other kids were like
Mm,
all over the place, but you
yeah.
so strong in your opinions. You'd built up so much strength in who you were by that point
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
then you soared.
I'm like a good horse. If you can break me without breaking me, I'll be a
Yeah, yeah,
phenomenal
yeah,
person. Okay, that's so good. Mom, thanks for being on the show. I'm going to talk a little bit more about my ADHD after you jump off here. But so if you're still listening to the episode, stay tuned because I'm going to talk a little bit more about how it affects my work and ways that I prioritize the tasks and things I do as I grow businesses because that's why you guys are here to listen to the show, is to grow your business. But Mom, thanks for being on the show.
yeah.
I'd
You
love.
bet. Love you too, Bubby. Bye. Bye.
Okay. Okay, folks, so let's wrap up this episode by giving you a couple quick tips on how I balance work, being a human, running a business, running multiple businesses, actually, running 3 different businesses with my wife, while also dealing with having ADHD. Like, I didn't grow out of it, I still have it. I will forever have ADHD. It is just the way that I am. Now, let's talk about a couple different ways. I've got 5 tips for you in order for you to work with ADHD. How can you become better with ADHD? That's the goal. So why don't we talk about that? Tip number 1, okay? Here's the first thing. I'm going to start with the problem, and then I'm going to give you the tip. So ADHD means you have a hard time focusing on things you are not extremely passionate about. That is like the clearest way that I can define my own ADHD is if it's a task I don't want to do, my brain just does not want to do it. I don't want to get started on it. You guys know how that works. So the solution for me was I have to take inventory of all my tasks. So ADHD tip number 1, if you are working with ADHD, is you got to take inventory of all of your tasks, okay? Write down all the things you do in a week, the things you love, the things you do not love, because the reality is your brain is working against you when you're trying to work on the things you do not love, things you are not passionate about. It's hard to get started. It's hard to finish them. It's hard to stay focused on them because that's how ADHD wires you. So what you have to do is you have to figure out what tasks you can actually complete without having to complete. Now, what I mean by that is you will never, ever be in a position in life where you can just outrun all the things that you do not want to do. You will always have to work on things in life that you do not want to do. But when you run a business and in life, there are a lot of things that you can actually get help doing that can alleviate that from your plate, alleviate some of that stress, and allow you to stop kind of pushing a rock uphill with your ADHD. So for me, I got to write down all the tasks in my personal life, all the tasks in my business, and go, what do I not like to do? And can I find somebody else to do it for me? Can I pay somebody else to do it for me? If the answer is yes, big check mark, do it. It will help you so much with your ADHD. So that is step number 1. It is take inventory of all your tasks that you have to do any given day. Figure out the things that you can offload off your plate. Get rid of them. Your brain actually is wired to not want to do them, right? So we're always going to have to push through, and ADHD is not an excuse for you to not do anything you don't want to do. But if there's an opportunity to have somebody else do it for you, potentially even at a better caliber, like do it more professional than you, do it faster, do it quicker, do it more effectively than you can. If you can pay somebody to do that, go do it. So examples for that, like I actually love finances, but I love finances. I love math. However, I'm not good at getting started on all that stuff. So I have a bookkeeper that does our entire company, a couple of our companies' bookkeeping every single month. And I just know that if I did not outsource the bookkeeping, I just wouldn't get it done. I wouldn't do it. I get to tax season, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed because I got nothing figured out. Where I have a bookkeeper who every month is giving me records, profit and loss statements, like figuring everything out, making sure everything is dialed, everything is reconciled. And I never have to think about it. If I had to do that myself, my ADHD would repel me from doing it. I would suck so bad at it. So again, tip number 1, write out all your tasks. Take inventory of the ones you love to do. Take inventory of the ones you have to do even though you don't like them, but it's life, so you got to do them. And then take inventory of the things that you do not like to do that you can find somebody to do for you. And odds are, if you're sitting here saying, well, it's going to cost me money, Joey, not everybody has money. I had to start paying for things before I kind of had the money to pay for that thing, simply so it would give me my time back so that I could actually then go make more money, because I have ADHD and I won't do that thing, but it had to be done. So get smart about your ADHD, guys. You often have to find ways to get resourceful to get help on things you do not want to do, okay? That's number 1. Number 2 is chunk your tasks out. ADHD tip number 2 is chunk your tasks out. I suck at getting started on things. If I have a massive daunting project, hey, Joe, you got to complete this whole thing front to end, front to back. Can you go do that? I'm going to be like, but I've learned to chunk out tasks. So I'll use video editing as an example. If I had to edit an entire video project, if I have to do that, instead of thinking in my brain, oh, Joey, you got to go edit a video project today, I'll procrastinate all day. I won't do it. However, if I go, okay, Joey, you got to start with file management. Do 10 minutes of file management. Get everything filed, everything managed in 10 minutes. Boom, set a timer, make it happen. I can do it because I chunked out the task. Well, then I go into timeline prep. Then I go into story composition. Then I go into music. Then I go into audio and color. Then I go into formatting. I take little breaks in between these things. I chunk out the tasks so my brain can actually process what I have to do. Therefore, I know how to get started. Okay, super helpful. For some people that might seem more overwhelming, but for somebody who has ADHD, chunking things out and making a bunch of micro tasks might actually feel like it gets easier, okay? Tip number 3, ADHD tip number 3 is give yourself time limits. If I'm not racing against the clock, if I do not have a competitive nature against time, I won't do it. I'll just procrastinate, and that's just the honest truth. I don't do things until I have to do them. So force yourself to have to do things. Instead of waiting 3 days right until the timeline is due to do a project, start the project a week in advance, but give yourself a timeline. So what I can do is I'll go, okay, I've got a little thing that can sit on my desk. It's a clock. It's a little like dice that's got like 5, 10, 15, 30 on it. And I can flip it to whatever side, and it's now auto timing. So it's like, oh, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes to finish all my emails today. Boom, flip the thing over on the side, put it on my desk. It starts counting down. I know there's now a clock on me. Therefore, it pushes me into action, pushes me into gear to actually get started on something. And because of that, I'm racing against the clock. There's a competitive nature there, and I like competition, so I'll go get it done. However, if there's never a timeline on something, or if I don't give myself a timeline as a self-employed individual, I just won't do it. I'll procrastinate because that's what ADHD makes me do. So give yourself timelines, and you'll be blown away with what can happen, okay? Tip number 4 is do what is best for you. ADHD tip number 4, do what is best for you. I was on ADHD medication for years of my life. I then stopped because I was more concerned about the label of being diagnosed with ADHD and taking medicine. And I was interested in trying some natural strategies that were just going to improve how I could handle my ADHD. So I decided to do that. I also got on medicine at one point in my life when I was younger because it was the best thing for me at that moment. So do what is best for you. Do not be afraid to try something. If you're not on medicine, if you're not on meds and you're really struggling, potentially inquire with a doctor about what going on meds would look like. If you're already on meds and you feel like you're struggling, or the side effects don't feel like they're worth it, like you feel like you don't sleep or you're not eating properly, and it's only really helping you gain like an hour of focus a day, maybe that's not worth it for you. Maybe you should try something else. Now, not medical advice, but I'm encouraging you, do what is best for you. I've been on medication. I've now been living off medication for years of my life, and there's benefits to both sides of those. There's downsides to both sides of those, but do what is best for you, okay? This is the biggest one, guys. We're going to end with this. ADHD tip number 5 is drop the label, okay? The longer you live under the label of I am not as good as somebody else because of my ADHD. The smaller you are going to play, the longer you live under the label, under the roof of I have ADHD, I cannot do X, I cannot be X, I cannot go to this level, I cannot rise to that level. The longer you live under that, because of your ADHD, you are seeing it as a deficiency. It's not a deficiency. It's not a deficiency, it's a difference, okay? ADHD is not a deficiency, it's a difference. It should be called attention deficit hyperactive difference, not attention deficit hyperactive disorder. It's really not a disorder. ADHD makes me way more creative, way more energy. I've got way more passion. I'm so much more resilient than a lot of people. I've got great relational skills because of it. I've got courage and so much else that so many people don't have that don't have ADHD. ADHD primes all of that in me, and it's the genetic makeup of who I am because I have ADHD. That is not a deficiency. Last time I checked, all of those things are not deficiencies. Those are strengths. So ADHD is not attention deficit hyperactive disorder. It's attention deficit hyperactive differences, okay? So the longer you live under the roof of my ADHD is a negative thing and it's slowing me down, it's holding me back, you're not going to get to where you want to go. So the most growth that I ever made in my life, the most confidence I ever got in my life is when I stopped seeing it as a deficiency. I started seeing it as a difference, and I just dropped the label. I was like, I don't care if I'm ADHD, if I'm not. I don't care what you think about ADHD. I'm just Joey, and I'm going to go do what I'm going to do. I'm going to do what I'm really, really made to do well. And if it's something I'm not made to do, I'm not going to stress about it. I'm going to try my best to get better at it, or I'm going to hire someone to do it for me, whatever. But I'm not going to live under a label that keeps me playing small. And life's turned out pretty great doing that. I really want to encourage you to do the same thing. So too many people are bogged down by the label. Please, the label is not a wall that you'll never get over. It is a hurdle. You just got to learn how to run and jump. And when you can start seeing your diagnosis as a strength, I think life becomes pretty cool. Like, I'm grateful for my ADHD. If I didn't have ADHD, like, I kind of look at people who don't have ADHD sometimes and I'm like, oh, it sucks. You don't have that piece of you. We can't relate on that because I'm buzzing over here about something, or I heard that thing and I was focusing on this, and this at the same time. That was cool, you know? And they're like, what are you talking about? You know? So life is great with ADHD. Life's also great without ADHD. Neither one is better. ADHD is not a deficiency. It's a difference. That's what I'm going to wrap up the podcast with, guys. Again, none of this is medical advice. This is just my own experience with working as an ADHD person. I've built multiple six-figure businesses with ADHD. I've done multiple six figures a year with ADHD. On our way to seven figures, I'm sure soon, as we continue to build businesses and build our portfolio of stuff. It does not have to bog you down, okay? We're ending the podcast with that. I'm so grateful if you listen to the whole show. It means you're probably someone who has ADHD. Hope you got through this. Hope you're able to focus on it. Hopefully it was something that you like to focus on. Therefore, you're able to listen to the whole thing. If you know someone who has ADHD, you're a parent of a child who has ADHD, and you listen to this, I hope you're encouraged. I hope what my mom said. Shout out to my mom. What a great word from her on what she was talking about when she was kind of saying the same thing. She stopped parenting me under the label, and she started parenting me for what the label can enable me to do. Oh, that's a word right there too. My mom stopped parenting. My mom and dad stopped parenting me underneath the label of ADHD, and they started parenting me over the label of ADHD. Like, what is the label going to allow him to do rather than stop me from doing? That's a word right there. If you're a parent, definitely do that. Anyways, guys, we'll wrap up with that. Again, Joey, from me to you, the rest of the team behind the Creative Rise podcast that makes this thing happen. We are so grateful for you listening, tuned into the show. Other than that, we'll catch you on next week's episode, which is really cool. If you've not checked out the Creative Rise pricing calculator yet, please go do that. That is a great tool if you got ADHD to play around with, waste a bunch of time on, because it's really fun. I feel like that was an ADHD project. I got so focused on the Creative Rise pricing calculator because, like, I need to do this. As my mom said in the episode earlier, like, I always stick up for the underdog. I'm a huge underdog fan. And I was like, man, people are struggling with pricing. Let me create a tool for the underdog. So the Creative Rise pricing calculator, completely free, our gift to you. All you got to do is go to creativerise.com/pricing calculator. You'll find the pricing calculator in the link in the description of the show, along with a bunch of other free resources for you. Some paid resources too, if you want to buy any of the courses that we sell that are really beneficial. I think they're priced so affordable too. Check it out there. But other than that, guys, leave a rating and review if you enjoyed this episode. 5-star written reviews are how the show grows, so we'd so appreciate that. And please reach out on social media. We love when you guys DM us on social. We love when you guys text us by clicking the text us button in our bio. It takes you literally to our phone number. You can text us, and we'd love to answer you there. Other than that, again, from the team, myself, Christy, who was not on this episode, and the rest of the team behind Creative Rise, thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.